Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And I find myself in particularly good spirits today because this is affording me the great opportunity, the great chance, and the great privilege and honor to be able to share with you some thoughts and comments that I have about a very special film in the context of a very special release. And that release is from the Criterion Collection. Yes, if it's okay with you, let us continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. And specifically a box set or a collector set that the Criterion Collection released about a month or so back. And this set is at spine number 1186. And the set is right here. And it is called, collectively, the RANOWN Westerns, 5 films directed by Budd Boetticher, starring Randolph Scott. And there are a total of 5 feature films included in this wonderful set, plus a number of supplemental features. But I'd like to focus today on one of such feature films. In fact, the first film ordered in this cycle of films. And this film is described as being from the year 1957, and indeed it is directed by Budd Boetticher. And the name of the film is The Tall T. This is the fantastic, exciting, suspenseful, emotional Western film described as being from the year 1957, and it is from the producer Harry Joe Brown and also associate producer Randolph Scott, and it is from the director Budd Boetticher. The writer is Burt Kennedy, based upon a story by Elmore Leonard. The director of photography is Charles Lawton Jr., and we have a great cast in this, including, for example, Maureen O'Sullivan and Richard Boone and Arthur Honeycutt and Henry Silva, and starring the one, the only, the legendary Randolph Scott, again, who has a function and purpose and artistic contribution both in front of the camera and behind the camera of this film. Once again, directed by Budd Boetticher, and it is this film, The Tall T. The Tall T comes to the Criterion Collection courtesy of being one of the films in this set, the RANOWN Western set. This is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition, so that means there is going to be a 4K UHD disc and then a Blu-ray disc corresponding for each film. And there's an interesting sort of a combination of those, and we'll get a little bit into those details as we progress with these video discussions. But before we get into those details, and before we get into a discussion of the supplements, let us try to focus on a plot or story structure approach to this. And I'm not going to say anything specific about the plot, again, for the benefit of those of you, my dear friends, who have not yet seen this great film. You are in for a real treat, but I don't want to spoil it for you, but I'll try to keep things as vague as possible, again, to preserve the surprises, because there are a lot of surprises, I think, in store when one watches this great film, The Tall T. And we're focusing in, I think, on our main character, Randolph Scott, who emerges pretty much immediately from the outset. This is Brennan and the Randolph Scott character, and we understand that he has some, say, business to attend to in a type of frontier town area, and there's a way station area, and there's already a number of characters that we're meeting related to perhaps directly or indirectly with our Randolph Scott character. And included in the mix is the recently married couple. And specifically, a lot of people are paying attention in this community to the woman who has just married, and this is the Maureen O'Sullivan character, Doretta Mims. And a lot of people are paying attention to this because we understand that she is from a very wealthy mining family. And so there's a lot at stake in terms of the wealth that she currently, say, represents and is linked to, both directly and also via inheritance, or the implication is such. And so there's a lot of attention portrayed are directed at her and also at her new husband, Mr. Mims, as well. And they are scheduled to be riding on Stagecoach. And that brings us to the Arthur Honeycutt character as well, which provides, I think, a certain sense of levity and maybe a type of relaxed nature, which is, I think, so apropos a great film like The Tall Tea in terms of its character and richness and warmth. And that warmth and richness also is derived from the great performance by Randolph Scott immediately from the get-go. There's a confidence, there's an assuredness. There's also moments where Randolph Scott is not afraid, and Budd Boetticher are not afraid to show Randolph Scott in very, say, very personal situations where maybe he's not seen to always get the upper hand physically. There are moments early on where he's seen in terms of trying to handle a sort of bull riding or a cattle riding, etc. It's not quite going in his direction, or he thinks it is, but it may or may not, and that leads to some potentially physical humor or comic hijinks, as well as some potential risk and danger. So there's a lot in terms of already from the get-go in terms of action, adventure, Western aesthetic, as well as seeing our main protagonist, or potentially our main protagonist in the form of Randolph Scott, in situations where he is maybe being set up as being the heroic figure, but also being set up as being a figure that is seen to be vulnerable, that's seen to be very maybe fallible, and that has certain, say, shall we say, weaknesses, both on a daily level grind, but also maybe things that might expound or exponentially grow into things that have a significance that may or may not have potential significances when we get to the thrust of the story. And what the thrust of the story involves some sinister undergoings at a nearby way station area, and some kidnapping and outlaws, and that coincides with our Randolph Scott character trying to do his business, and also the stagecoach trying to get into their business. But these outlaws get into the way in a very violent and sudden and abrupt and very shocking manner. And here we have the set of great villains, such as the Richard Boone character and also Henry Silva character and others. And I say a set of great villains because we are already being presented and confronted with a set of danger and villainy, and quite a sharp sense of viciousness in what these characters do to our main protagonists. And there are some really unsettling moments in terms of displaying how far these villains will go. But the proceedings are made all the more complex by the very fact that, for example, Richard Boone's performance as the usher character, say the main leader of this group of outlaws, he has a very likable streak, or it's a potential for us, the viewers, to be very to like him or have a sort of sympathy towards what it is he's doing, or at least expressions of personality and character. And this shines through in the way that he carries on with our Randolph Scott character, the Brennan character, and how he seems to have a sense of, maybe, dare I say it, a type of humane streak in the midst of all this evil and villainy that's also taking place. And there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of killing, there's a lot of potential for killing and danger and destruction and death. And also there is room for betrayal. I mentioned before this plot line about the couple that has recently married, and the wife in particular having family links to a type of large family wealth. Well, that also comes into play too, and we see seeds of betrayal threaded into the through line, and how that might also be part of this outlaw kidnapping plot that is underway. But with all these dominoes that are set on the villain side, the hero side, again with Randolph Scott's performance there, and accompanied by Maureen O'Sullivan and others, we have the stakes raised, or stakes upped, for what is a great sense of, say, tension and unnerving maybe even eerie scenes, scenes of psychological depth and pressure, as well as a type of a crisis situation. We see our characters in crisis situations and seeing how they try to handle themselves in crisis situations that are also brought about through the acts of these human beings. And so that also sets up in the world of this Western the potential for a type of showdown. And my goodness, when it comes, it comes. It evolves and it explodes in a sense of violence and action, but also arrives in very unique and interesting and very subtle and indeed unexpected ways that are always enthralling and always feeling organic and part of the plot and story, and also very much entertaining and exciting the whole way through from start to middle to finish. Oh my goodness, what a film this is. The characters are engaging and rich and alive, and we have villains that when they show their villainy, better stand back, because there's something bad about to happen. That type of tension in the air when you watch the film. But that's always mixed in with a sense of the warmth and humor. There's also the sense of people thinking and planning, trying to figure out one situation to the next, either whether it's a type of expression of, say, a type of instinct to survive, or maybe it's the instinct to save other people. And there we have the displays of heroism, or the displays of betrayal, or the displays of, say, type of human frailty and weakness. And it's all on display. And I make these points in these ways because I want to emphasize too that this is a great, exciting action adventure Western film that is chock full of great scenes, both of humor, comedy, physical-based tension, etc. That is also punctuated very much by the psychological beats of the characters that feel very fresh and true and authentic. The reasonings and the motives and the motivations of our characters never feel tacked on. They never feel artificially applied. There's always an organic quality to what the motivations of the characters are as we understand them, which I love, and that has its link into how these characters are portrayed from an emotional and psychological level. And speaking of the emotional level, one of the great strengths too is how the various relationships are forged. There are all these sorts of relationships, maybe within the, say, the ranks of the outlaws, and there might be a sense of, say, maybe a type of twisted sense of morality on the one hand, but also a sense of self-preservation, and also the relationship between the married couple that may or may not turn out the way one expects. And also there's Randolph Scott's character, how his presence may affect the certain emotional entanglements that are also expressed at the very beginning, and the like, and also relationships between parents and children, the relationships between, say, the frontier life, and also maybe the fully established, say, settlement areas. There's also a type of old and new. There's also a sense of law and lawlessness, and also the sense, and also in terms of gender roles as well. And they're all wrapped within the construct of this incredibly fast-paced and wonderfully rendered Western. It has often been described too as a type of B-Western, and I think Budd Boetticher and Randolph Scott and Harry Joe Brown and company, when you see this film, they wear that badge like a badge of honor. It's a source of pride, because there is so much that can be said about the playground that is constructed within the context of a so-called B-Western or B-film Western. There's nothing wrong with that label. On the contrary, it thrives on that, and it does things that are exciting and that have great flourish and that have great charm and wit. That is a great example of something that crosses many levels into the realms of, say, true captivating cinematic art, as well as being these great examples of, say, type of a pioneering filmmaking spirit. I mean, a lot of this is mentioned in terms of Harry Joe Brown, Budd Boetticher, Randolph Scott, and others, the RANOWN Westerns context, which we'll get a little bit into when we talk about some of the supplements later on in this video discussion. But and it is a rip-roaring ride through this Western landscape. My goodness, this is such a fun film, so exciting. When we talk about the RANOWN Westerns, this is one of my favorites in this bunch, and it's a great way to start a RANOWN Western journey, if you're fresh to this or if you're new to this world, my goodness, this is a great place to start. And it's a great place to watch and rewatch and rewatch and rewatch again, courtesy of many releases that have been made over the years. And latest now, or up now, the most recent of such physical media releases is right here. It's a great set. We'll talk a little bit more about those details later on, but suffice to say for now, it's a great set for many reasons, one of which being the inclusion of this great film, again on 4K UHD or Blu-ray, your choice with this combo edition. The inclusion of this great film, which is The Tall T. The Criterion Collection has released this film, The Tall T, which is directed by Budd Boetticher, as part of this set, which is the RANOWN Westerns, 5 films directed by Budd Boetticher, starring Randolph Scott. And we'll talk, as I say, a little bit more about the details surrounding this great set. But one of the details I want to focus on now is details about the presentation. Again, we have the choice of watching this on the 4K UHD disc or the Blu-ray disc. And I have the 4K UHD disc in the player right now, and we have the Blu-ray menu, which is part of that 4K UHD disc 1, the Tall T. And information about the masters can be found with the on one of the pages of this book, which is also part of the set. It's a staple booklet, and I love that. Hurrah, hurrah for the staple booklet. We'll talk more about what's included as far as the essays. But one of the things I want to mention is on page 31, it says about the masters, specifically about the Tall T, and I quote, "The Tall T is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. It was restored in 4K by Sony Pictures Entertainment. Scanning, initial color correction, and digital restoration were completed by Cineric in New York from the 35mm original camera negative. SDR color was completed by Danny DeVinson at Cineric. HDR color grading was completed by Sherry Eisenberg at Warner Brothers Motion Picture Imaging in Burbank, California. The monaural sound audio was restored by Audio Mechanics in Burbank from the 35mm original DME magnetic tracks. The restoration was supervised by Grover Chris for Sony Pictures Entertainment." So here we have information about this. Now, I have this film actually in previous non-Criterion releases, and so we understand too that this master, according to this, is based upon a Sony Pictures Entertainment production, or the restoration work there, or the restoration production spearheaded by Sony Pictures Entertainment. So I wouldn't necessarily call this heads and above, or heads and shoulders above the absolute best presentation I've seen of this film. I think previous releases that, as I say, I have, I think did the film really, really great justice. And so I wouldn't necessarily call this, in my eyes and my ears, the ultimate place to go when watching this film. Now, that being said, it is a very pleasant experience watching. I would say that there are, of course, those occasions maybe noticeable, not so much in this film. Maybe we find it more noticeable in other films in this set, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in those videos. But sometimes, not always, very, very infrequently, but they do occur once in a while. You get the sense of the type of graininess of the shot, and you see the kind of the speckle on the dot matrix type of speckle in the shot, which I think is meant to sort of suggest, or is part of the way in which the grain of the film is somehow expressed in these digital means. Again, I'm using very subjective and very non-technical terms because I'm not an expert, and I apologize. I'm just relying on my own eyes and ears here. But when I watch this, sometimes it becomes so noticeable as to be somewhat distracting. But I would say that's a very minor thing, and I can train my eye to get used to that, or I guess it becomes naturally subliminally trained, I suppose. And again, when I watch the Tall T here, it's not as noticeable, or it doesn't happen that often. It may be once or twice throughout the entire running time, I think that occurs. But that, again, it's not noticeable to the extent that I become overly distracted by it. And I am also overcome on a positive note by how, I think, rich the reds are, the reds and brown colors are, in terms of the rugged nature of the landscape that's presented here. They've always seemed, to my eyes and ears, to be very richly presented when I've seen, say, other discs or DVDs or Blu-rays of this prior to the Criterion release here, but there is still that sense of the awestruck nature of again the outdoors as it's depicted here, and that's very important too because there is a lot of color. There's a lot of color in the color palette, and I think it's preserved very well. There's a lot of I said reds and blues as well to represent aspects of nature and the outdoors. In terms of the Western rugged life that's depicted in this Western, as well as some of the aspects of the clothing and the dirt and the smoke and the like. And so those details I think are preserved very, very faithfully and quite effectively. So as well as the accompaniment of the audio soundtrack. So it's a very good presentation. It's something where I think I will rely on this, although I'm happy to with having, say, prior non-Criterion releases as well. So I'm very happy with this overall. I'm happy I have it, and I will watch this again on this Criterion release. But I'm very happy too with other Blu-ray or DVD releases of this prior to Criterion. So, with that being said, overall, I'm quite happy with this. I've mentioned before, but let me say again that this is a film that is going to be made available to watch either on the 4K UHD disc, which is what I have in the player here, or the Blu-ray disc. And I'll speak about the Blu-ray disc a little bit later. But before we get to that, I just want to mention that you can watch the film on either of those disc options. And when you watch the film, you can have the commentary track as well as an option when you watch the film. So the commentary track will be available when you watch the film either on the 4K UHD disc or on the Blu-ray disc. When you get to the supplements themselves will be found only on the Blu-ray disc. We'll get to that later. But first, before we get to that Blu-ray disc, let's speak about the commentary track. Again, commentary track can be made available to listen either on the 4K disc or the Blu-ray disc. So let us talk about it here in the 4K disc. And so I press the commentary menu option, and I see the description here by Criterion, and it says, this commentary track recorded in 2008 features film scholar Janine Basinger. To listen to the commentary track while viewing the movie, press the audio key on your remote at any time. So this is a commentary track that has been carried over. It's a previously recorded commentary track, but it's great to have, and it's a type of classic here in terms of the scholarship and attention given to the works of Budd Boetticher, which really, I think, emerged over the course of, say, the last, over the course of the progress of the release of these films, again, in the DVD and Blu-ray formats beginning circa 2008 or prior to this. So it's really great to have this carryover here. It is a great, great commentary track. It's wonderful to be able to listen to it again. Janine Basinger's comments and expertise in the RANOWN westerns and the works of Boetticher and Scott and Harry Joe Brown, etc. It is just, it's so far-reaching, so deep, so filled with a type of information and data and anecdotal moments and evidence. And it's wonderful. This is one of the great, great commentary tracks, and it's also made great by the fact that Janine Basinger is not only a real scholar and expert, she's able to present it in a way that's very warm and friendly and welcome. That's the thing about commentary tracks that I just want to point out. And this Basinger commentary track is a great example. Not only for me, I mean, it's important for a commentary track to have information. It's also very important for a commentary track to present it well and to have a type of warm and welcoming tone to the voice, something that isn't necessarily too off color or too off-putting by a type of discerning, maybe a discerning type of, say, arrogance or this level of a type of maybe a sharpness that is a little bit difficult on the ears. You get none of that with the Basinger commentary track. On the contrary, this is one of the great ones. So fun to listen to, so warm, and as I say, so filled with information and knowledge. Again, about the history of RANOWN, what RANOWN means, the word RANOWN and RANOWN Westerns, because it's a bit of an, maybe it's not clear what the meaning of this might mean, but when you get, oh, this is what it means. So again, especially for the benefit of those who are new to the world of Budd Boetticher and the RANOWN Westerns in particular. So this is wonderful. Talking too about uh, making wonderful winks at the audience or to us, the commentary listener. When the very famous line about, contention, what's contention like? Oh, it's people, lots of people. It's a very famous line that comes up early. It's a wonderful wink to the audience type of moment in the commentary track that appears. Also speaking about how this is a quote-unquote unconventional Western, which I think is a really great phrase to put, and she gives us reasons as to why this is, I think, a very apropos phrasing, um, and how there is a way in which also there's an interesting thing too about what the T means, because the title of the film is The Tall T. What does the T mean? When we get to the trailer, there might be an interesting theory posited by the trailer as to what the T means. But here, the commentary track indicates that it's one of the great mysteries, actually, what the T means. But perhaps that might not necessarily be so important at the end of the day as much as what we see transpire. And we can make up our own minds, us the viewers, as to what this means. Talking to here about the contribution of some of the great people behind the camera. For example, the music, the great music. I forgot to mention Heinz Rumheld, which is also very much a key player in the RANOWN Westerns world, the Budd Boetticher world. So this is wonderful. And also speaking of the players, there's some great comments here about the performers or the actors here. So Richard Boone is mentioned. Skip Holmeyer is mentioned as well, and Henry Silva, as well as Maureen O'Sullivan and Randolph Scott. Gosh, and interesting backstory about Randolph Scott and his history in terms of Hollywood and early links with, say, Gary Cooper, and then leading into his own in terms of starring status, and then eventually working with people like Harry Joe Brown and Budd Boetticher and others in examples like The Tall T. Speaking of Budd Boetticher, there's also a lot of great information about the background of Budd Boetticher. You'll get a lot of this throughout the entirety of this great Criterion set, because there are many supplements, not just on this disc, but many other places that we'll talk about later. But here's one place to get it in the commentary track here for The Tall T. And also some mentioning here of Elmore Leonard and the Captives, the story that is described as being maybe the basis for what ended up being this film version called The Tall T. It's interesting to recount Elmore Leonard's, say, reaction or public reaction towards this film, etc. And also, too, the nature of the dialogue. The dialogue, of course, is Burt Kennedy, the screenplay by Burt Kennedy. So there are some really interesting ways in which language is used in a type of curt, short way to emphasize sort of the brevity of the situation, and almost quirky combinations of words and sentence structures that I think add to the maybe you listen to it and it almost passes one by, but then you kind of think about what's said again. Like, hey, that's an interesting way of phrasing that type of moment in the film, that type of reaction. So that's great. That's really great. Subtext to burn. That's one of the references there, so it's just wonderful. So, oh my god! And then mentioning about Budd Boetticher and his background as a bullfighter too, which comes up a little bit in the film, and will be mentioned by Scorsese in another of the supplements here. But overall, this is one of the classic commentary tracks. This is an example of why commentary tracks are so great. It's the commentary tracks like the Basinger commentary track from '08. Oh my goodness, my dear friends. If you haven't had the opportunity to listen to this great commentary track, my goodness, what are you waiting for? Oh, it's so wonderful. Please check out the film with the commentary track if you're able to. It is great. The Criterion Collection has made it available once again, so bravo for being able to get it and to obtain it and to make it available for this release. The commentary track from 2008. And now let's turn our attention to the supplements that can be found with this disc. So once again, let me just be sure that I'm absolutely clear here. So we have the 5 films that are made available across 4K UHD discs or Blu-ray discs. So, and then when we're speaking of the supplements that are linked to those films, there are a set of supplements that are linked to each film. And then actually there's going to be a separate disc as well that's devoted to even another range of robust supplements as well. So we won't talk about that supplements disc now. Let's talk about it a little bit later in the course of this video. But for now, the topic of discussion is the tall T. So let us focus in on the supplements that can be found that are accompanying the tall T. And so when we put in the Blu-ray disc that has the tall T, we see immediately that the Blu-ray disc or Blu-ray disc number 1 has the tall T and Decision at Sundown and Buchanan Rides Alone. And so you have the choice immediately to select one of those 3 films, which is right here. Again, I apologize for the out of focus nature of this. I apologize, but you can see it if you put the disc into the player. So let's now select the tall T, which is what I'm doing, and now that'll bring the tall T menu here, movie chapters, commentary track, which is what we just spoke about, and then the supplements. So if we go to the supplements submenu, we see 2 supplements that are linked directly to the tall T. Again, we will have more supplements along the way for each of the films directly, and then a separate set of supplements on a separate Blu-ray. So we'll talk about those later, but for now, let's speak about what is linked directly to the tall T. First up, we have an introduction by Martin Scorsese, and this is approximately 7 minutes. And this is Martin Scorsese talking one-on-one. So if you haven't seen this, this is a great opportunity to see this now. So Martin Scorsese talks about seeing this film for the first time as a kid, and also talking too about the context of the RANOWN westerns, again in the backdrop of 1950s, late 1950s, also the type of dark, almost film noirish elements that are being introduced into the realm of the westerns thanks to people like Budd Boetticher, or people like Anthony Mann or James Stewart, etc., or like Budd Boetticher and Randolph Scott, etc. So, and that's what we have here. Another way to describe the RANOWN westerns, and indeed the tall T, is a type of dark, brooding film noir type of western. Right? I think, and I love the word that Scorsese uses here, was a flintiness. He watches the film and he's getting a sense of what he describes as a flintiness, which I love. I think that's such a great word to use. And also talking too about the importance of collaborations. You know, one of the key cinematic collaborations is that between Randolph Scott and Budd Boetticher. And indeed too, when we're speaking about those collaborations in the RANOWN westerns, we're speaking too about Harry Joe Brown, Burt Kennedy, and Randolph Scott, etc. So there are many people that are coming together for the purpose of what will later be known as the RANOWN westerns, or the RANOWN western cycle. Again, this box set being representing sort of the quote-unquote official films in that canon or cycle. And speaking too about Budd Boetticher and his background, bullfighting, that has come up a lot as well, and also the way in which the rugged nature scenes are shot. There's a sense of isolation, psychological isolation as well, which is very key to a lot of the way in which characters are depicted here. The betrayal aspect, the isolation aspect, the desperation, as well as the nods to humor and comedy and warmth. This is great. So you can tell Martin Scorsese is a fan of this film, and indeed the other RANOWN westerns. So wonderful stuff. So this is the introduction by Martin Scorsese. It's approximately 7 minutes. And then coming up is the trailer. And this is so cool because these trailers are really great. And also there's a little moment where the trailer actually has a suggestion for what the T might mean in terms of the tall T. T for... You're going to have to watch a trailer to see what I mean. But in any event, it's another cool trailer, so please check it out if you can as well. So that's it as far as the supplements that are tied directly to the tall T. But as I say, this is not the end of the story in terms of the supplements overall. There will be other supplements linked to each of the films respectively in this sort of menu-like fashion. And then we'll have a separate disc of supplements that we will talk about in a future video. So, and that has a lot of insight into Budd Boetticher and also mentionings of tall T, as well as RANOWN westerns overall, Randolph Scott, etc. So it's not the end of the story in terms of the tall T, and it's mentioned in mentioning in certain supplements. But at least as far as direct supplements are concerned, that's what we have here. Again, linked to the tall T as found on Blu-ray Disc 1 of the Criterion Collection release. Just a quick word about the booklet. We will come back to a discussion of this booklet, which is again part of this release, as well as a discussion later about the overall aesthetic qualities of the physical media packaging and the digipack release and the way that the discs are stored. We'll talk about this in another video, but let me just say that for now, there are in fact a number of, say, comprehensive essays that are included here, and they're each great. There's also a brief write-up on each of the films. So for instance, the Tall T specific write-up can be found on pages, this is 4 and 5 of the booklet. So that's really cool. So it has the cast and crew on this side and then the write-up on this side. I would describe the write-up as being a type of synopsis as well, a synopsis type of writing. So it's not a type of, I wouldn't call it an academic essay per se, but you will get a comprehensive academic essay or two actually, or more than one, when we get to the later pages, starting from around page 15 on this. But as I say, on pages 4 and 5, you'll get the information about the Tall T. So it's worth checking out if you can. Please check that out. And again, we'll have more things to say in later video discussions about the booklet overall, the packaging overall, and the overall supplements on the separate disc. But for now, my dear friends, that's our discussion of the Tall T. Wow, the Tall T. The Tall T. Again, if you are new to the RANOWN Westerns and you're wondering where to go, watch the Tall T. I mean, if you like Westerns, you enjoy Westerns, you watch the Tall T. You're going to have a great time. And this is the perfect entry point into the world of Budd Boetticher, the world of Randolph Scott, RANOWN Westerns, Harry Joe Brown. This is the perfect entry point in many ways because it captures you immediately, and it has those maybe genre concepts and expectations, but then it goes in many different twisted directions that are shocking and hilarious and enthralling all at once. So and as well as being this great vehicle, part of this cycle, which we now know as the RANOWN Westerns. This is the film, which is the Tall T. I strongly recommend this if you haven't seen it already, my dear friends. You're in for a really fun time at the movies when you watch the Tall T. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great films, including the RANOWN Westerns, including the Tall T, including Decision at Sundown, which we'll talk about in the next video in this discussion series, and then beyond. Oh, my dear friends, so many films to watch, so many great films to watch, including the Tall T. So I hope you continue to watch a lot of great films, and I hope that you continue to, as I say, be happy and healthy and well, and keep on watching a lot of great movies. And my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.